I got a little secret, and it's the fact that I wish I could wear Uggs. So comfy, so warm, but they're ugly as sin, and that's why we designed the mugs. These are our manly Uggs. Shearling on the inside, Chrome XL leather, and we even have a slugs version, a little slide with the shearling as well. Limited quantities, 20 in each color, and they drop on August 14th. Check them out below. So I've got 2 examples of real shearling, 2 examples of reconstituted shearling. I don't know what the official name is, but that's what I'm calling it, is reconstituted shearling. Fake shearling, and synthetic insulation. And what we have is the Mugs 3, the basically Uggs, but this is like their true version. This is the wild wool version that's actually better and more true to the original and like actually Australian owned. Then for the reconstituted shearling, we have one of my favorite brands that we haven't talked a lot about is Duck Feet and the Ugg Tasman. For fake shearling, the Limbs Chelsea Boot Witch. I'm not talking too much trash on it because your boy's wearing a pair right now. This one version with I think it's one version that has fake shearling. The rest are different. And then for the synthetic, we've got the Ugg that also has some reconstituted shearling, and the North Face that has some synthetic insulation. So yeah, let's just go over some quick pros and cons, just to give you some rough information. Because if you don't know let's just start with shearling. Because if you don't know what shearling is, it's the lamb skin with the wool fiber still attached and tanned through the entire process, with the end result being that you still have the lamb's skin and the lamb's fur on the outside. And that's true shearling, because you can see it's attached in the pores or the hair. And that's about as natural of an insulation as you get, because people have been using lambskin and shearling for probably centuries, honestly, to keep themselves warm. But it's tricky, because if you look at some of these other ones that reconstitute shearling, you might look at this like, oh no, that's real shearling, because it's glued to leather, and you might assume it's the leather backing is part of the shearling, but it's not. And so it's tough to tell sometimes. So the way I identify it is I try to find a cross section somewhere and see if it is actually tied into the leather. I look at the density, because you're gonna get a lot higher density out of true shearling compared to reconstituted shearling, and we'll go over why in a sec. It's gonna be warmer because it's denser. It's gonna be a lot fluffier, so it takes a little bit longer to pack down. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm trying to identify real shearling versus reconstituted shearling. Those are some of the features and attributes I look for anyway. Pros of shearling is it's super warm. There's a reason why I don't know how long sheep have been around, 1 million years? Nature took 1 million years to make shearling. And it's because it's one of nature's most perfect insulators. It stays pretty warm even when it's wet. It doesn't feel wet up to, depending on what sites you read, anywhere from 30 to 50% saturation in weight, and it doesn't even feel wet. And it even still insulates, even once it's more saturated and you can feel it's wet, it still maintains its insulating properties. Another thing that's really nice about real shearling is it absorbs your sweat. It's a little more breathable, because it's not like a fake material that has an impermeable layer. It's literally leather and fur. And so it absorbs your sweat more, and it absorbs it better because it has that ability to not feel wet until it's more saturated. It has natural antimicrobial bacteria properties because of the natural lanolin that a lot of times is still in the fibers themselves. And it's just more natural. It's just a natural anti-stinking material. And that's why, when I was in high school, maybe, there was people that had real Uggs, it was real shearling, and then there's people that didn't have real Uggs, that was like the fake shearling, and the smell difference was astronomical. Shearling is also super durable. That's why you see like bomber jackets from World War II still in use to some degree. If you take care of it, because those fibers, the hair is literally in the flesh of the animal, it's really, really hard to get it to pull out. And that's maybe like the last pro, is it's because it's literally in the skin of the animal, it's in there pretty well. Pretty good. And maybe my favorite thing about wool, just across the board, whether it's reconstituted, shearling, like wool insulation, wool pants, whatever, is it thermal regulates really, really well. Because you can be up on a hike, and it's, at least for me, like when I hunt in the mornings, I'm all bundled up because it's cold as hell. And I'm like, oh, I got my wool on and I got all these insulating layers. I can hike for a lot longer without having to shed layers, because wool thermal regulates more. It has a wider band to operate in from temperature wise before you get overheated. Versus more synthetic stuff, there's a lot shorter band and you can get overheated a lot faster. And so you end up And so for me, you know, like for hunting, I really like wool because it absorbs your sweat, it absorbs your smell, it thermoregulates really well, but it's also really, really heavy. And so that's kind of some of the cons with shearling is it's really heavy because it's dense and it's wool is a surprisingly heavy material or fiber. It's really costly, you know, because the little teeny lambs, they're not that big. Sheep are pretty small little animals and there's only so much yield per hide. And compared to a big cow, it's like 50 square feet of leather. And it can cost anywhere from like $30 to $50 a square foot compared to leather's like $5 to $10 a square foot. Like I mentioned, it also takes special care. It takes a little bit more time and energy to make sure you maintain this. And you can't just throw it in a washing machine and hope for the best. Like you have to kind of clean it in a special way. And ultimately it's not waterproof. You know, it's a lot of these other materials and other layers besides shearling are more waterproof, where this on the outside here is the flesh side, the suede side, that rough side that absorbs water a lot easier than the grain side, but the grain side's hidden because the fibers of the hairs come out of the grain side. And so it's just not very water resistant. And at the end of the day, even though I'm a hunter and I was raised on a cattle farm and stuff, some people don't like that it is an animal byproduct. And it is a very obvious animal byproduct. It's the skin and the hair of an animal, and that sometimes is not what people want. So it's worth considering. An alternative to that, because you know some people want all the wool features, all the benefits, all those things, but they don't want it to be true shearling for whatever reason. Product update with the boot breakers. So after some feedback from you guys, this was our original boot breaker material, just some veg tan, but it's a little too smooth on top. We decided to go with slightly adjusted leather where we got a little bit of a buff top. So come on over here. Now you can see the difference between the old 5mm versus the new. And the nice thing about these is they take up room inside your boots. So if you got a boot that's too big or you want a shoe that feels more like a true heritage boot, you just throw one of these in there and it solves all your problem. They don't stink to this veg tan. Don't forget we also have our regular foam boot breakers with the big thick mattresses in the green, the medium thickness in the blue, and the OG boot breakers at 2mm. These are the ones that really started this whole thing, where we just made a little insole you can slide in any heritage boot without changing the size. So it's just 2mm thick. Give you a little bit of squish, help you break in the boots, and you can keep them in the boots if you want. That's where the whole name boot breaker came from. So that's it for the product update. Product update. Reconstituted wool is a really nice alternative because you've got a lot of the insulating factor. You don't quite have as much density as a real shearling, but you can still get it in there pretty thick. You know, you look at this Tasman, and I didn't even think that this was fake or a reconstituted shearling until we literally cut it in half. This duck feet is a little more sparse, but it's also a lot thinner. Like that's gonna pack down a lot faster. It's not gonna be as hot. It's not gonna be as bulky around your foot. And so you also have a lot more control over the density and how the fibers actually lay. You know, where this is like a little bit more matted kind of texture. This is full length shearling. But you have to keep in mind too, a lot of times they're gonna mix other fibers in with this, because I know at least the UGG is not full shearling or wool, because it's 60% recycled wool, 40% lyocell, and that's it. And then obviously the backer. And so you don't get true full wool a lot of times. You get like a blend, and so it makes it cheaper. It's not as hot, you know, there's some pros to it, but it is just a cheaper alternative to shearling in a lot of ways, but there is some pros to it. And it maybe has less environmental impact, maybe has a little less animal suffering stuff. I don't know what it's called. Like, it can come from a byproduct rather than like an actual, how do I say this? Like there's ultimately what I'm getting at is there's a way to logically kind of skirt around the idea that it's an animal byproduct, even though it still is. You can kind of play head games, but like, no, it's fine because it's reconstituted shearling. Take it for what it's worth. I'm biased. But at the end of the day, you still get a lot of the pros of regular shearling, but it's a lot cheaper. But at the same time, the cons are it sheds a lot more. You know, you take and I like this boot. I really like duck feet. And you take this and you can see you can pull out big chunks. Versus real shearling, you can still pull out chunks, but it's a lot harder, and they're not as loose, obviously, because this is just glued to a backer or weaved into a backer, where this is grown out of the skin and stays in the skin. So it's also going to stink more, you know, because with the lyocell, you know, and some of the other synthetics they a lot of times mix in with this, those don't have those heat retaining properties. They don't have those antimicrobial, antibacterial properties. They don't have natural lanolin in it. It has a lot of those things that people really value about shearling. Compare that to fake shearling. Really, the pros of fake shearling are there's no animal byproducts. You know, it's a way cheaper way of doing things. You get the look of fur, but without the expensive fur. You know, it's not going to insulate the same way, which can be maybe a pro to certain people. But to me, it's mostly just for the look. Anytime you see fake shearling, it's usually in like a fake collar. You know, it's more for look than anything, because you don't really get nearly the same insulating factor, and I don't know what that's for a word. You just don't get the same amount of insulation from true wool, because you don't have all those little properties with wool, with like the way it absorbs this and that. The same things I've said like 50 times already. Cons of it sheds way more. And once again, I like these lambs. I just don't like this fake shearling. You know, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't insulate. It sheds more. It's not real fur of any kind. It's just either polyester or some sort of synthetic material. And let's burn it. I'll show you. Because fake wool does this, or fake shearling, and it smells like burning plastic, versus real shearling. It self-extinguishes pretty quickly. It smells like my sister's curling irons from when I was a kid. Because it's hair, okay? And then finally to the synthetics, pros and cons of synthetic insulation. Well, first of all, a lot of these insulations, they vary wildly in quality and quantity even, and their insulating factor, and like a lot of different things. There's different qualities, so it's the same thing as shearling. You can buy a really cheap shearling, like I hate shearling. And you could buy like a really nice shearling coat or pair of boots or whatever, and you're like, no, shearling is the best thing in the world. So it's the same thing as leather. It's a wide variety, but a lot of the synthetic insulation you see is either made of like PET, polyester. A lot of times, if they're trying to get a little bit more towards eco-friendly and be more natural, they'll use like eco fibers like Permaloft, Sonora, polypropylene, nylon, but they've also, in the last 10 or 20 years or so, they've really started to develop more natural fibers for synthetic fibers that aren't necessarily just like reconstituted wool or ground up wool. They use bio-based materials to make the fiber. So it's still synthetically made, so they're made synthetically, but they're bio-based. And each of those different materials and different types of insulation are gonna have different properties and values, but just to talk generally about synthetic insulation, the pros are basically, we talked about super lightweight and packable. You get a lot of insulation and a lot of heat retention for not a lot of space. Compare that to shearling, that's super thick and woolly. It can dry really quickly depending on the type of insulation. Others can take forever to dry out, but if you have a fast drying one, it can dry faster than shearling because it doesn't absorb the water or the moisture nearly as much. So it's a little bit of a pro and con. It's gonna feel wet because it's not absorbing as much of the moisture, but at the same time, it's gonna dry faster because it's not absorbing quite as much of it. Versus shearling and wool, it's gonna absorb it so it doesn't feel as wet, but it's gonna take a lot longer to dry. Another big pro is, you know, like I said, some people just don't like animal products in their products. And even though like some of these have like leather and synthetics, it still matters to a lot of people. Regardless of what I think and my personal opinions, like some people just don't wanna wear dead animals around their feet, which is totally understandable for the most part. And that is an important thing for a lot of people, because especially in the outdoors world, there's a lot of people that are maybe not in the hunting side of the outdoors world that don't want to harm nature at all. So it is a pro to a lot of people. Old synthetic insulation used to really lose its loft, and it used to lose its insulating factor over a few years, but this newer styles and these newer innovations in synthetic insulation have made them a lot more reboundy, or like they hold their shape a lot more. It holds the insulating factor more. It's insulating for longer, and that's an important part of it. And that's part of why shearling is so warm, is it traps air in all those fibers. And so if all those wool fibers or all the synthetic fibers get laid flat and are completely compressed down, then you lose a lot of that insulation because that heat transfers through the non-trapped air a lot faster than trapped air. And so that's another potential pro and con with this synthetic insulation, because over time, if you do get this all packed down, it's gonna lose a lot of its insulating factor, but the same thing's with wool. And like I mentioned earlier, they're less breathable than wool a lot of times. They don't have as wide of a band of insulating temperatures without needing to exchange into something heavier or strip down and get something a little bit cooler. They can be less durable over the long term because these synthetic fibers, you know, if you just pull one little fiber out and you were to compare how it performs to a single wool fiber, you would find that the wool fiber is significantly stronger and it's a lot less prone to breaking because it's a natural grown fiber versus an extruded fiber that's synthetic. But at the same time, less bulky, more bulky. And maybe the last con is that even though it packs down flatter, if you get the really big bulky coats, like more closer to this one that Thermore sent us, they do get really bulky, they pack down, but they're also really loud. You know, that's the one thing I really don't like about synthetic coats and stuff for hunting and like just casually too. So they're just so loud, you know. But at the same time, you get a lot of the insulating properties at a fraction of the cost compared to Shearling. So hopefully that gives you a lot of the information you need in order to make some smart decisions when it comes to which materials, show you the difference between real Shearling, reconstituted Shearling, fake Shearling, and its synthetic counterpart. And let me know what else I should add to this. You know, put some thoughts and some your own personal opinions in the description. Let me know what you liked about this video and how we can continue to do this, because I want to do more than just unboxing. I want to cover some more of this information that's maybe not worth a main channel video, but it's still important to cover and start building that information base for you guys and for us. And it's kind of fun to do. You know, it's fun to just kind of sit down and ramble and like talk through some stuff instead of being super structured. So support if you like this, because that's how I'll decide if I do more. And check out Thermore. You know, they work with a lot of brands. They're the manufacturers and suppliers of the insulation, and there's a ton of different brands that use it. Check out the Higo no Kami knives and any of these boots. We'll put links to them as well. Some good, some bad, some okay. And thank you guys for your support. See ya.